Hey there, it's Angie, and welcome to Midlife Magic and Mayhem. This conversation is with Pam Moore. Pam is an occupational therapist turned intuitive eating coach and health and fitness journalist who lives in Boulder, Colorado, with her husband and two daughters. As an intuitive eating coach, her mission is to help women stop micromanaging their food and exercise so they can start fully showing up in their lives. The author of There's No Room for Fear in a Burly Trailer, Pam's writing has also been published in the Washington Post, Runner's World, Self, The Guardian, Time, Outside, AARP, and Forbes, among others. Despite, or more likely because of, being picked last for every team as a kid, Pam is also a certified personal trainer, six-time marathoner, and two-time Ironman finisher. I mean, I've run one marathon. I can't even think about doing an Ironman. Her podcast, Real Fit, features conversations with women athletes about body image, enoughness, and more. Pam's newsletter, Real Nourished, features evidence based tools to reduce food related anxiety, improve body image, and embrace exercise as a form of nourishment instead of punishment. This is a really fun and informative discussion about trusting the wisdom of our bodies and our own intuition. Please enjoy my conversation with intuitive eating coach Pam Moore. Hi, Pam. Welcome to Midlife Magic and Mayhem. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Angie. I'm so excited to be on with you.
Well, I'm really excited about this conversation, and I would love for you to tell us first your story, like whatever's relevant about who you are and how you got to be here. I know your career path has taken several turns and it's fascinating. So I would love for you to just start off by introducing yourself and telling us about how you got here.
Yeah, I would love to. And I will try to give you a sort of condensed version because I could talk all day. And then you're welcome to, ask me whatever questions you want. Where do I begin? I've always been a creative person. I always like to draw, always thought that I would do something helping people. And didn't really know what my options were besides like doctor and nurse. So I thought doctor, and then realized once I got to like Chem 1, I was like, oh, I'm not willing to put in the work here. So that went south quickly. By chance, there was a panel at my college called Are You Thinking of a Career in Occupational or Physical Therapy? And I thought, well, I never heard of occupational therapy. Physical therapy could be intriguing. I don't know. So I show up at this panel, found out what occupational therapy was, and I thought that's for me. This is a way to help people use my creativity. There's all kinds of settings you can work in. So I went to graduate school for occupational therapy immediately after college. I practiced for a little over 10 years in different settings: hospitals, outpatient, mental health, nursing homes. And by the time my second child was born, I was only working part time. I was pretty burnt out on healthcare. And meanwhile, she was born in 2014. In around 2007, I had started a blog purely for fun. And so if your listeners get anything out of this conversation, I would say follow your curiosity. So just out of curiosity and just for fun, I'm like blogging because I was really into triathlons at the time, and all the triathletes seemed like they had blogs. I was always like this was before we had Facebook, and I guess college kids had Facebook. We didn't have an Instagram. We didn't have Twitter. We had blogs. So I'm like, I want to tell my triathlon stories in a blog. And my husband had always encouraged my writing. I started the blog before I met him. He was encouraging of it. Now I'm getting ready after the second kid is born to go back to work, but I really don't want to. And he's like, you should be a writer. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't do that. Like, I had so much imposter syndrome. I was like, I can't just like be a writer. Are you kidding? I'm just like a blogger. But I did. Long story short, I did. And I started out just, writing guest posts for free, writing for, sites you've never heard of for like $20, $50. And looking back on that, I'm like, okay, that was kind of my internship because I don't have formal training as a journalist. I was a history major, and then I got my master's in occupational therapy. I taught myself basically how to write. And then over time, as I wrote more and more and broke into higher paying, better recognized markets, I decided I don't want to just be writing about like mom stuff, because that's what I was writing mostly, was parenting stuff. My passion is really health and fitness. I've been doing marathons, I've been doing Ironmans. I've always loved endurance exercise. And I thought, how can I write about women's sports and health and fitness? And I pivoted toward that by, I would say, around like 2018, 2019. I'm trying to recall how this all went down. My youngest went to kindergarten in the fall of 2019, and that's when I got a lot of traction. And I was like, "Oh my god, this is great!" I'm writing for like Washington Post, Runner's World, Outside. Everything's looking good, and then the pandemic hits. I'm like, oh my, because that was the first time I really had a lot of childcare for both of my children, and that was a bummer. But I maintained my momentum and started a podcast because I wanted to interview women athletes, and that, so I'm kind of jumping around in time. Sorry, this isn't like super chronological, but it was about a year before that I started to recognize that all of my craziness around food, which I haven't really talked about, was becoming really unsustainable. I mentioned that I was into endurance sports, and part of that is because I love it. And I really enjoy the process of just like showing up and getting better and continuing to show up and get better. And I made friends and I was outside and I loved it. And it was a way to manage my craziness around my body and my weight. I felt like as long as I exercised enough, I had like permission to eat dessert or eat whatever. And I had a really unhealthy relationship with food. And it was, and we can talk more about this later, but basically in 2019, no, I'm sorry, 2018, because it was right before my 40th birthday, I discovered intuitive eating and I became an intuitive eater. And then I started reading more and more about it. Like, it felt like a natural thing, but then I started actually reading about it. I was like, oh, this is a thing. And got certified as an intuitive eating counselor last year. And so now my career is partly health and fitness journalism and partly intuitive eating coaching. So that is me in a nutshell, Angie.
Well, I love it. And I love all the pivoting and how breaking into being a writer and a journalist, you started where you started. And I think people can, and especially like once we get to a certain age, we'll start to think, well, I'm too old to do that, or I don't have the training, or, we come up with all of these different excuses about why we can't do certain things when it's just fear, and everyone has fear about something, and then change can cause fear, any sorts of transition or change. So I love the fact that you kind of just opened that up and said, I'm just going to start, I'm just going to write, and I'm going to publish, and I'm going to start a blog, and then not really totally being attached to where it went, having an idea or having a direction that you want to go, but not being gripping to the attachment of what it needs to look like. Like, I started posting for free. I started $20, $50, not like I need to get in the New York Times by next Sunday. And, and then if you don't get there, you quit, right? Because that's what we do. And it, points back to that imposter syndrome that you were speaking of. I think I read on your website something about for your birthday at some point, your husband did something really sweet. What was it?
Yes, he did. And I'm actually going to show you what he did. I use these to stack up my computer because I have a lot of them. This is a book that I wrote that I didn't know that I wrote until I saw it. So I'll explain how that happened. So, backing up, like I said, my husband was always really encouraging of my writing. When we met, okay, so we met randomly at a bar and on Valentine's Day. And a few days later, we got in touch, or he got in touch with me. He was, we're trying to make plans for a date. And he said, I just want to tell you that I Googled you and I found your blog and I think you are hilarious. So, and I knew I liked him because I'm like any other guy that was like, I Googled you, I'd be like, ew, what a creep. Like, keep that to yourself. I don't need to, you know, but I was really flattered. And of course, for a writer to hear that somebody thinks that they're a good writer is like, oh my God, yes, like take me now, right? So he and I had been talking for a while on and off about, he had this idea of how fun it would be to take some of my blog posts and turn them into a self-published book. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And we like started this shared spreadsheet on Google Drive where we were like inputting what we thought were the good ones. But it wasn't something I took seriously. However, he obviously did, because I think it was my 37th birthday. I had said, I just want this hoodie. I just want this Lululemon hoodie. I'm going to order it for myself. It came in the mail. I put it in his office. I said, do me a favor, just like put this in a gift bag and give it to me on my birthday. So now it's my birthday and I'm opening my present first thing in the morning in bed. And he gets out his phone to like film this birthday present opening, which is so weird because he is not somebody who wants to capture every single moment. He's more of a like, let's just enjoy the moment kind of person. So I'm like thinking it's weird, but I'm not really thinking anything of it until I open up the hoodie and I'm like, cool. And he's like, there's another present in there. I'm like, okay. So I reach down and I pull out this book. It's got my name on it. It's got an ISBN number on the back. It's got blurbs from other writers who I respect. It's got a legit foreword from a good writer friend of mine. I'm like, I am, and if you know me, this never happens. I am speechless. I am literally speechless. And you can tell that it's complete, I think people might be, because he put it on YouTube and I think people might be like, oh, you staged that. We did not stage it. I am wearing my glasses, my like Coke bottle glasses. I'm very nearsighted. My hair is going 18 directions. I'm wearing my cupcake flannel pajamas. Like it is not staged. But like, yeah. And that was him telling me, I believe in you. Because this was around the time that I had fully like told the hospital where I had been working, I'm not coming back and trying to figure out where I'm going next. And it was just him being like, I see you as a writer. And I, that day I remember being like, well, what do I do with it? What do I do now? What do I do? And he was like, do whatever you want. He's like, first, why don't you read it? He said, but you can order copies for your mom and your dad and your siblings, and that's it. Or you can market the crap out of it, or you can do whatever you want. I don't care, but I want you to have it.
That is the sweetest story. Like, if there are any men listening, like that kind of thing goes so far. That really is truly. I mean, that's such a thoughtful gift, to package that and do. I mean, it's really, really sweet.
Oh my God, I want to like cry just talking about it. The only problem is no gift he's ever given me since then has even come close.
He's totally screwed now. Like,
Yeah.
but he did it that one time. Like, now like a piece of jewelry is going to be silly and ridiculous. Or
Exactly, exactly. But no, that gift was everything. That was everything. And I tried to market it and I like, put it in local bookstores and I gave talks kind of around some of the themes of the book and just I don't know, it really did change the way I saw myself. And of course there was a lot of imposter syndrome because I'm like, did I really write a book? Like sure, I wrote the words in the book. And he did, oh my God, he hired a copy editor to make sure that like there weren't spelling mistakes and that the grammar was right. I mean, it's like a legit book, but I still had all these fears of like, I didn't really write this book. I didn't use the same process that other authors to write their book. I had all of that. And yeah, there was a lot of that going on. And I, in retrospect, I look back and I'm just like, so what? Of course, like you said before, of course it was new. There was fear. It's human.
exactly. And isn't that interesting? The language that we tell ourselves. Well, I didn't really write the book. I didn't really do it. It's not a real book. Like, oh my God, no, you wrote all those words that were in that book. You just happened to not be the one to put it together. Right. But it's fascinating the stories that we tell ourselves about all sorts of things. So yeah, it's such an interesting point. Um, I do want to learn about intuitive eating. It is something that I've seen out there in the world. And I feel like I might have some understanding of what it is, but I have a feeling there's a lot that I don't know. So I would love for you to explain your journey to intuitive eating and give us a real sense of what it actually means.
Yeah, I would love to. I'll start with like a very brief overview of what intuitive eating is and tell you kind of how I got there. But intuitive eating essentially is the idea that no expert, no program, no diet, no app knows more about what you need than you do. Of course, in the absence of like a medical condition or a food allergy or something like that. But that we can take care of our own nutritional needs. We can eat what we want to eat, like we did when we were babies, right? You were wanting to eat, you ate, you were done, you threw it on the floor. That's how we could eat if I'm not suggesting we throw food on the floor, but like we could trust our own cravings and our own intuition to feed ourselves if we can. And this is the really hard part. If we can shut out all the noise that's telling us you need to be a certain weight, need to be a certain shape, need to be a certain size. Being thin is being healthy. Being thin is being attractive. And that's really hard. You're going way, 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 way against the grain. Okay. Like this is hard stuff. There's a lot. So it's not just the way you eat, right? It's the way you think. It's going, if I allow myself the pleasure of eating the foods I want to eat, my body will naturally know when to stop. I mean, I think that's the fear because part of intuitive eating is permission to eat all foods at any time. And that can be, and for years, I was like, I'd heard of intuitive eating. I had a sense of what it was. And I thought, well, I would just go off the rails. I'm not doing that. Number one. Number two, I like that's not gonna work because I need to be a certain size. Like I just, which is just ironic because just for an example, like for my best friend's 40th birthday, her sister-in-law asked everybody to bring photos through the years of our friendship with this friend and she was going to put them in a scrapbook. So I set about looking at all my old photos because we've been friends since the 3rd grade. So I have lots and lots of photos of us together. And I'm looking at all these photos over more than 20 years of friendship and going, oh my God, at different points in my life, I was exercising more, I was exercising less, I was quote unquote on the wagon, quote unquote off the wagon, trying the zone diet, trying the this, the that, whatever I was doing. I'm looking at all these pictures and I'm like, I basically look the same. I stressed out so badly for so long for no appreciable change to my body, right? Like, are you familiar with the set point theory?
I don't think so. Mm-mm.
It's basically that our bodies have a set point where we like to be. It's mostly based on genetics. About 70% of our weight is based on genetics. And you can make an effort to go in either direction, but mostly your body wants to settle back down where it wants to be. So it can be an exercise in futility to imagine that you really like we were sold this idea by the $72 billion a year diet industry that you can look however you want to look as long as you try hard enough. And that's simply not the case. We see these influencers who may be blessed with great genetics and who are maybe using photo editing and they're using, certain lighting and they're posing certain ways. And we also don't know what they're eating. We don't know what supplements they're taking that may or may not be safe, right? We don't know their lives, but they come on and they're like, look at me. I do this workout. You do it too. You'll look like me. That's just not true for most people. And science tells us that the greatest predictor of weight gain is having dieted. When you diet, your body goes into like it doesn't know you're on a diet. It thinks, gosh, are we starving here? Should we conserve? That's why when you're undernourished, you lose your period because your body's going, well, that's not an essential function. We can't afford the energy it takes to gestate a baby if we're starving. And another myth is like you don't have to be ridiculously skinny to be starving. People in bigger bodies can have eating disorders too. They can be undernourished too. We've been sold this myth. Anyways, I said I would give you a brief overview of intuitive eating. Now I'm getting into the weeds. I'll come back to it. But anyways, intuitive eating is basically, in a nutshell, not being on a diet and trusting yourself. Like once you get over the initial, when the novelty wears off, because there is novelty, and you may eat some food that you've always told yourself was bad. Say it was cupcakes. You might eat cupcakes 3 times a day for a week, maybe 2 weeks, whatever it may be. But you will. This is the thing. You will come to a point where you're like, I'm kind of sick of that. And I came to intuitive eating from a background of what I would call disordered eating that is like, I think, very normalized in our culture. I think many, many of us are in this camp of like, okay, certain foods in my head are good and certain ones are bad. We should never eat this. We should never eat that. And for me, meals were always some kind of mental calculation. What have I already eaten today? What am I going to eat later? Was I invited to a party? Like, do I know that I'm going to be eating something really good at a party, maybe birthday cake? Okay, so then I can only have salad for lunch. Or maybe I can do what I want as long as I ran at least, 6 miles this morning. All of this chatter in my brain, it was constant and and feeling guilty all the time because I'd be, good for a while in air quotes and then inevitably bad. And thinking that I was the problem and now knowing that the natural result of restricting is binging. That's just what we do. That's a biological fact. It's not a character flaw. And when you feed yourself a good solid meal 3 times a day and a snack or two, you're not going to have these night binges. Part of the night binging is A, just you're hungry, and B, like psychologically, it feels bad to restrict. It's like a rubber band. You're going to go the other way. So anyhow, yeah, and I found intuitive eating from, I guess, my lowest point. I tried all kinds of things, and for almost a year I was on and off counting macros, and that was very stressful. I was, they say it's flexible dieting. They say, "Oh, you can eat whatever you want as long as it fits your macros."
But that's still restrictive
Exactly.
in a certain way because you have to fit in the categories. I've done that too. Like I've done all the things too, right? And really from a place of kind of experimentation because I enjoy the experimentation from a health perspective. And like you said, ultimately, it's I'm not in my own experience, I'm not someone who enjoys a lot of restrictions in any
I knew I liked
fashion,
you.
which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, we could go a lot of places with that. But yeah, and it just so but anyway, back to the macros and counting that is still a form of limitation. It's a form of restriction. It's a form of, and again, like if there are true health issues that someone is really working through, that's a different
Yes,
topic. That's
absolutely.
kind of a different subject. We're talking about,
Sure.
your kind of normal, healthy, run of the mill, day to day woman who's eating. I do have a question particularly about women in midlife, right? Because that's for the most part, my audience here. Do you see or maybe the question is, do you see this more? Not more, but do you see it in women at our age? Because I think a lot of times we think about younger women having disordered eating, college age. We kind of think about it in younger people. Do you, in your practice and in your life and communities, do you see it in women in their 40s and 50s?
Absolutely. And that's actually where I see many clients because their bodies are changing and it's stressing them out. And they want to keep everything the same as it always was. And you can do that. I mean, well, I don't know. I don't know that everybody physically can do that. I don't want to like speak for other people's experiences. I guess what I'm saying is you have a choice. Do you want the mental stress that comes with trying to control the shape of your size of your body as you have biological changes that make it very difficult, if not impossible? I'm sure there's way. I mean, if you want to do that, do it. But if you get to a point where you're like, ugh, all the things I'm trying aren't working and I'm just super stressed. What now? That's usually when people come to me because they're kind of done being stressed. And they're like, there must be a better way. What can I do? So, part of my job is not just, I don't see myself as just helping people figure out how to eat. That's certainly part of it, because part of intuitive eating is going, like, here's an example, like, as far as macro counting in particular, and for listeners who may not be familiar, macros are just like, we've got fat, protein, and carbohydrates are your major macronutrients. And the idea behind counting macros is that you eat them in a specific ratio to get the body composition that you want. That's sort of the goal. And I do think like if you're an athlete, particularly like a weightlifter and you want to get your protein needs met so you can build muscle and I do lift weights. And I have experimented lately with just counting protein and I actually find that drives me a little insane and it's not worth it for me, right? Like if it works for you and you're like I can intuitively eat and because that's the thing, like part of intuitive eating is also eating for performance. It doesn't just mean eating when you're hungry. It can mean eating if you're not hungry because you want to replenish so that you can do the things you want to do. Like if I knew that I was going to be working out multiple days in a row, which I always do, I'll usually eat breakfast after my workout, whether I'm hungry for it or not, because I want that energy. So that's like there's nuances to intuitive eating. But I guess coming back to like something that I'll do with my clients is be like, all right, let's have you try something different with your nutrition and track how you feel. We're not stepping on the scale because the scale can create a whole mood, not that kind of feelings, but feeling like how much energy did you have? How much muscle soreness did you have if you were working out? That type of thing. Um, or even like maybe you found that you were always ravenous at lunch because you were skipping breakfast and you thought that was like totally fine and normal. Now you bring breakfast back in and you go, oh, My energy's better. I have more patience. And I'm hungry at lunch, but I'm not ravenous. I actually like this better. So that's something that we'll do. And if you find that eating a little protein with every meal makes you feel fuller for longer, great, because and maybe you do that. But that's about how you feel, right? And it's not a rule. It's just something you've observed and you're like, okay, that makes me feel better. But if you end up at a brunch and there is no protein and the only thing to eat is like a bagel and cream cheese and you're like, dang, that looks good and that's going to be really nice with my hot cup of coffee here, and you eat that, you eat it and you move on. You're not obsessing about it. So I'm helping people back to what, like, I'm helping people figure out ways to eat whatever it is and move on. Even if you ate more of it than you were comfortable with, even if you were like, oh God, I ate 50 of those when I really would have been fine at 3. Fine. Let's just approach it with curiosity. Why'd you do that? What could you do differently next time? No judgment, no shame, no guilt.
Exactly. And that's all of those words were the things that were coming up for me as you were speaking. Shame, judgment, and guilt. So all of this really, I mean, it sounds to me more of a process of learning how to stand in non-judgment of ourselves
Boom.
and trusting the process and trusting our own body, trusting that we will be able to listen to the signals. For me, our bodies are extremely intelligent, extremely wise messaging systems. And for a lot of reasons, I'm sure which we can go into, and our listeners probably can intuit, for a lot of reasons, those messages have been shut down. We have been trained and programmed to stop listening to the messages that our body is giving us all the time. It can be from culture, society, family, religious, a boyfriend, a teacher, a friend, like whoever, right? It can come from all sorts of places. So we learn to not trust ourselves and not trust the wisdom and the intuitive sense from the body. And you coming from this perspective of, I guess, it is that the perspective, some of the perspective that you're coming from, like when you're working with people, developing. I mean, really, it's self love. And I know
That's
that word
exactly
kind
what
of
it
that
is.
term gets thrown around, and but this is deep, deep, deep unconditional love. Like, yes, I ate a bagel. Okay, like that's not going to change who I am.
Exactly. I feel guilty I ate a bagel. And it's like, okay, let's break that down. What do you feel guilty for? What'd you do wrong? Did you hurt someone? Did you kill someone? Did you rob someone? Did you like hit a parked car and drive away without leaving a note? Like you should feel guilty about those things. Maybe you even should feel really bad about those things. But yeah, no, eating a bagel is not bad, and bagels have been demonized. But that's culture. That's not you, right? You as a toddler, you weren't thinking, "Oh my god, my chubby thighs. Oh, let's pick the salad instead of the bagel." You ate what you wanted and you stopped when you were done. And the thing is when you let go of the restrictions, you find that the cravings almost disappear on their own. And that's not to say you're never going to want a bagel. I mean, bagels are amazing. Maybe you will. I love bagels. I still love cake. I still love ice cream. But for me, it used to be somebody so much as suggested ice cream. I couldn't get it out of my head until I had some. Now, like this happened the other night. My family went out to dinner. They wanted ice cream after. It was freezing. I kind of had a stomach ache. I was like, I'll have a lick of some. I knew one of my kids wasn't going to finish theirs. I was like, I'll probably eat a few licks of theirs, but I'm not going to order any. And it was fine. And it wasn't sitting there like sitting on my hands feeling crazy. I just didn't want it that night. And because I knew that I could have it any old time I wanted, I was like, that's fine. I don't need it right now. When I want it, like I live a quarter mile from a grocery store. Like I'll be fine, and that's just super liberating. And so part of the work that I do is, with the mind and the self-love and just accepting your body, understanding, and that's easier said than done. And I've been on this journey for over 4 years and it's still daily work. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say, "Oh my god, I just love every part of myself." I mean, but what we can do is practice what we call body neutrality. body positivity is this movement. Actually, body positivity started as a fat liberationist movement in the 19, I think 60s or 70s. And that's a whole nother thing. And I believe that's really important too, because weight stigma obviously is a problem. And that's what my perception of positivity is about. Whereas body neutrality is where anybody and anybody can go, I don't have to be in love with my body. I don't actually have to walk down the street and feel like I look like a supermodel, but I can accept what it is. I can feed my body because I respect my body. I can exercise not because I feel like I need to lose weight, but because I've been sitting for a while and it would give me some energy, it would elevate my mood. I want to meet a friend. I want to feel the sunshine on my face. All there's like so many reasons to exercise that have nothing to do with weight loss, that are good for you and nourishing. And also respecting your body enough to go, gosh, I started my workout. I didn't feel that good. Now I'm 10 minutes in and I actually feel worse than when I started. This is my body telling me it's time to just sit down and look out the window and get a cup of coffee and chill this morning. And that's okay too. Like you said, it's listening. And part of intuitive eating that I think is surprising to a lot of people, but maybe shouldn't be, is like, because it's a practice of constantly tuning in with yourself every meal, every snack, every dessert, you get in the habit of tuning into yourself. And now, like, I am so much better at tuning into myself when it comes to clients that I might or might not want to work with. Like, am I seeing red flags instead of ignoring the red flags? I'm in touch with those. I'm like, no, I'm going to cut bait right now. Friends that I'm like, is this person taking too much energy from me? Is this friendship really filling my cup? They text me, I don't want to do something. I don't feel as obligated as I used to. I can tune into that feeling of like, oh, I'm feeling resistance. I don't want to hang out. Just in all areas of my life, I'm getting better at knowing deeply who I am and what I want. And starting with food was life changing.
Mm. That's such an important distinction. Is this the topic of learning how to tune into myself? And I even speak to it in my work with my clients, coming from a different perspective. You're coming very much from a health and food perspective, but in all areas, right? Like you're just saying, when I started this, it actually has helped me tune into every part of my life where I can make a decision or have choice, or I'm really able to now hear the different messages that are coming through, and should I do this, should I do that, at all these different choice points. So it can come through working with food, it can come in a lot of different avenues, but it's so important for women of all ages, and especially it's important for all people, all humans, but especially for us where we are as women at this particular age, especially with our bodies changing, especially with hormones changing. Yes, things are different, period. And it's really being able to come to acceptance and still be healthy and still move your body and still eat, for the most part, whatever you want, whenever you want, and have all that in flow. Because I think the more that we resist and the more we want to grip on anything, then the more resistance will come. So I'm curious, especially because you're an endurance athlete, and how how did all of that intertwine for you? Like being an athlete, working out a lot, the food, all that. And do you see a certain, I hope I'm going to ask this question correctly, but like a personality type that kind of goes along with that? And if that might be a crude question, and I apologize if it is, but if you're willing to kind of share some of your own, like, how this occurred for you, and what got you into your intuitive path. I mean, we've been talking about that somewhat, but if you're willing to share some of your own experiences.
Of course. And I hope I'm going to answer the question, but if I don't totally answer what you asked, just ask me more questions. Let's see. My journey to becoming an endurance athlete it's probably not super typical because I was not athletic growing up at all. I hated sports. And looking back, like I told you, I had like Coke bottle glasses and still do. I'm wearing contacts now, but like I was so vain. I would not wear my glasses. I got them in the first grade. I would not wear them until the fifth grade. And so that's a little bit about me. I got contacts in the seventh grade. But for all that time that I guess most kids are learning how to throw and catch a ball, I couldn't see the ball. So you don't like it, you're not good at it, you continue to not participate, and it's this cycle of not participating, not developing the skills, hating it more because you're so far behind your peers. So I mean, soccer was like fine, but basketball, I mean, like, yeah, I could see the ball, but I'm 5 feet tall. Like, I hated all of it. And I was getting picked last for everything, like a real morale buster. I did lacrosse in high school, just, I guess, because my friends encouraged me to do it. And I think I was just so flattered that they wanted me to be part of it. I was like, okay, I'll try it. Worst sport for me ever. I don't like looking back, I'm like, that was ridiculous. It was awful. However, to get in shape for the sport I ran. And as intermittently during practice, we would have to run 2 miles. And lo and behold, I'm like pretty good at running. I'm like, I can't believe this. I've never been good at something athletic before. And that really motivated me to do more. And besides being good at it, I liked it. I liked that I could just like kind of turn my brain off. I've never been somebody to listen to music or anything on a run. I'm just alone or with a friend, usually alone, and I'll just zone out. And I love it. And I feel calm and I feel centered when I'm done. And that was enough to motivate me. And then, yeah, I liked the validation I got. I liked when people would be like, oh, this is my friend Pam who runs marathons. Like, that's flattered my ego. And I don't think I really saw it at the time, but it made me feel like I mattered. I was like searching for something outside of myself to tell me that I was important and that I mattered. I liked those accolades, and I liked having something to focus on, like a goal. Like, could I be faster? And I would think, once I run a marathon in this time, I'll be happy, right? And then I would, and then I'd be happy for like 3 hours, and then I'd be signing up for my next race. And it was like this cycle of always searching for validation at the end of a finish line. And so part of all this food stuff was, yes, I wanted to lose weight, but I don't feel like I admitted that to anybody really. I pretended like I was trying to be healthy. I pretended like it was like for my sport, right? Because you're going to bike and run faster if you're lighter, hypothetically, right? If you're nutrient deprived, if you're calorie deprived, even if you're lighter, that's not so sustainable. But that was sort of like my cover, was like, I'm doing this for health reasons. And that's what I was telling my daughters when I have two girls. And I think they were like 6 and 4 when I discovered intuitive eating. But for the year up to that point, I was weighing and measuring all my food. And they were asking me, why are you doing that? And I'd be like, oh, to be healthy. So I'm like lying to my kids. I'm asking an app what to eat. I got to a point where I was starving. And I remember like asking the app, like, it was like a chat bot. And I was like, what do I eat? I'm in whatever phase of this, not diet. It wasn't a diet. Because I remember one of my friends being like, what's your goal? When are you going to stop doing this? And I was like, oh, it's a lifestyle. I really thought it was a lifestyle. And that's something about intuitive eating that a lot of diet companies are co opting. They're calling things a lifestyle, they're calling things intuitive that aren't. It's not intuitive if you get a green light for certain foods, a yellow light for certain foods, and a red light for certain foods. I'm sorry. That's not intuitive. And if you have a history of an eating disorder, that's a great way to retrigger it. And you may or may not know which specific, not diet, but lifestyle I'm talking about. But anyhow, I digress. Yeah, I was lying to my kids, and I was asking an app to tell me what to eat. And it was like, I was just hungry for like, I just wanted to check all the boxes. I've always been kind of an overachiever. I just wanted to check the boxes and do things quote unquote right. And for years, I had this little thought in the back of my mind that was like, would it be better to lose, a few pounds, look lean? Because that was the other thing too. I had a lot of imposter syndrome around the way I looked compared to other athletes, especially, as I'm sure you've noticed, in the city of Boulder, Colorado, where every person, you can't throw a rock without hitting a former or current Olympian or professional athlete. It is true. Yeah. And I'm like, I remember being postpartum and working out in the gym, and just like me with my like doughy stomach and looking around with other women with little babies with like their 6 and 8 packs back. And I've never had a 6 pack. I've just never had a flat stomach, right? But I just felt like I will look like a quote unquote real athlete when I look like all the other athletes, which is such a crock, right? Now I know that like athletes come in all shape and sizes. It's not, yeah, is being an athlete healthy? Sure. But is it healthy to obsess about every party, every vacation, every restaurant, every bagel? No, it is not. It was like if you're a gardener, if you've ever pruned a rose bush and then you see all the good stuff, you get rid of the bad stuff and you see the thing flower. That was like what happened when I got rid of all this mental chatter and stress. Like I could put my energy where I really wanted to put it. Whereas it was like diffuse before, it was here and it was there and it was like weekly everywhere because so much of it was getting hogged by this conversation in my head of like what I should or shouldn't eat and how much I should weigh and all this stuff. So I would ask myself, okay, would it be better to lose a little weight and be looking like a real athlete or to accept myself as I am? And for a long time, I was like, no, can't accept myself. Not going to go that route. Have to try to conform and look like what I think I'm supposed to, what a real athlete looks like. And it really got bad when I joined CrossFit. I love CrossFit. I'm not saying anything bad about CrossFit. It empowered me to feel comfortable using barbells and get strong, and so much fun to be a beginner at something at the age of whatever. I think I was 38 when I got into it. But I also started following a lot of CrossFit accounts on social media, looking at these CrossFit women, and then Instagram's targeting me with the ads for macro counting apps and stuff. It was like very tempting. That was part of it. Was again this comparing myself to other people. And like you said about acceptance, it's like when I accepted that I just can only be me, that's a huge part of it. I can't be somebody else. I can't look like somebody else. Also, like let me take a quick look at my family. My parents don't like have flat stomachs. They don't have like willowy limbs. That look at my sister. Like my genetics are a certain way. This is who I am. This is, and I'm fine. Like I'm fine. Maybe I'm even better than fine. But accepting that was really hard. But when I finally accepted that, that changed everything. And it's not like I'm out here like eating 3 donuts before a 50-mile bike ride. I still want to nourish my body in a way that feels good and energizes me. Like I know what's going to make me feel good during a bike ride. I know I'm going to feel a whole lot better if I drink a smoothie after a bike ride, even though it's hot and I don't really want to. I do those things. And like, yeah, if I want a piece of cake, I'm gonna eat a piece of cake. If I feel like salad, I'm gonna eat salad. But I'm not eating salad because it's like gonna be good for my diet. It's like
Right.
I just
And
felt
it's,
like it.
I have to be low carb or I have to be keto or I have to be this thing or that thing. And another thing I find too is we this the cover, the umbrella of health and wellness gives cover to a lot of things. And like you were saying before, it gives cover to why are you doing this? Well, because it's healthy. Because this is the most healthful way to eat. Because I'm a woman of, it could be anything. I mean, you could fill in the blank, right? Let's just say like I'm a woman in her 40s and we're supposed to eat less carbs and blah 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 blah. No, not true. Women need carbs. It's true. And they can come in all different varieties. There's also good research out there too that women, as we get into our 40s and 50s, and especially through menopause, do benefit from a little bit higher protein. So that
Yeah, absolutely. For
is
muscle mass. Yes.
for muscle mass. I mean, that's a thing. There's plenty of research out there about that. And I know that now you said that you are, and we had this conversation before about weightlifting and how important that is. So I would love your take on weightlifting now in your 40s.
Yeah, I'm a convert, Angie. Like for years, I was like, all right, I'll do the bare minimum of lifting that I have to do because I know I'm supposed to. And I only got interested in weightlifting for its own sake when I started CrossFit. So that was like 5 years ago ish, 5, 6 years ago. And CrossFit's so fun, I have to say. And one thing I actually really enjoy about it is that there are no mirrors. I think that's a CrossFit philosophy, but I've never seen a mirror in a CrossFit gym and I've been to a few. Have you tried? You've done CrossFit, right? Have you seen mirrors at any of the boxes you've been to? Okay, so A, I love that. B, the ones that I've been to were just like so welcoming. And I've been to a few. I've been to a few in Boulder and traveling to visit my family in Rhode Island. I went to some random one around there. They were so nice. So I just love that it's like welcoming of all abilities, all shapes and sizes, and just like being a beginner at something is so refreshing because it didn't even matter what I did. Even if I just lifted a barbell with like no weight on it, I was like, oh my God, I lifted a barbell. And somebody was watching me and confirmed that like my form was okay. Cause that's part of why I cannot recommend that you just go to your gym and grab a barbell if you have no experience with barbells. I absolutely would not do that. I'm also a certified personal trainer. So that's me speaking personally and professionally. But I, it was just so empowering. However, when I stopped doing CrossFit, I again came back to just like not being super interested in weightlifting for its own sake. So again, I would just like do it. If I was like, oh, all I have is 20 minutes, I have some weights in my basement, that's a good workout, I'll do that. But it was like sort of a checking the box thing. And partly because I didn't have a program that I liked. I did try one program and I don't know why, just maybe it wasn't interesting enough or dynamic enough. It didn't hold my interest. I lost interest very quickly. But then this, and that was maybe, that was before the pandemic. That was like right before the pandemic. Now this fall, like in late September. So it is now, we are recording this in early March. In late September, I committed to this app called Stronger by the Day. And I just want to say there's no like kickback happening here. Like I get nothing if you sign up for by the Day. But I had been following the owner. Her name is Meg. I don't know her last name, but she's at Meg Squats on social media. I liked her. My sister turned me on to her. And I was like, I did an aqua bike in the fall. It was a 1.2-mile swim and a 56-mile bike. And I'd had some issues with some leg muscles over the summer and they acted up during the race. And I thought, this is my body telling me, Pam, you're 44 years old. It is time to get strong. Like you cannot ignore this anymore. And I know as a health and fitness writer and as a personal trainer, I know we are naturally losing muscle mass every single year from the point, I think, age 30 onward. So like I know these things cognitively and I know that falls are a huge risk once you become osteoporotic as you get older. Like I know all these things, but I was like, all right, it's time to finally take action. And I was so surprised at how much I started to like it because I follow the plan. It's varied. There's always like a deload week every third week. So you go a little easier. And I don't take it so seriously. I'm not like, I have to do every single exercise 4 times a week. I'm like, if I get in there and I do the primary lifts and some accessories, I'm going to call it a win. I don't always have time. Sometimes it takes more than 45 minutes or an hour and I just don't have the time. But I'm like, whatever. If I'm being consistent and I'm coming in here and I am seeing, it's just so motivating for me. I will say, like, as much as like I accept myself and I love myself and I have compassion for myself, I also love getting better at something. That's super motivating. And being a beginner, you will see a lot of improvement quickly. And I'm thinking about like in terms of intuitive eating, like, should I be tracking my macros as a weightlifter? And I'm like, you know what? If I get to a point where I'm plateauing and I'm not getting stronger, I will revisit things. I absolutely will. I make an effort to eat protein in most of my meals, but I don't beat myself up if I just like feel like eating a grilled cheese. I'm not going to put chicken in it if I don't feel like eating chicken. So far, I'm getting stronger. I love it. I really love it, and I love the whole mentality of weightlifting is different. Like with cardio, I'd be like, okay. And especially doing cardio as a person who was trying to lose weight, I'd be like, oh, I only did a half an hour. Or like, I only did this. Oh, I should do more, whatever. Weightlifting, it's like half the time I'm just standing there because you need to recover in between sets. And that has been a real mental shift for me. And it's almost like the same shift I'm experiencing in my life of like, you don't have to grind all the time to make progress.
Absolutely. And there's another idea that I was exposed to a couple of years ago around what if, and it could be anything, could be lying on the ground in meditation, it could be sitting, it could be weightlifting, it could be running, it could be anything. What if, how can I stay as relaxed as possible while doing the necessary action and only flexing the muscles that need to be flexed? So even with weightlifting, like you were saying, like you lift and in between sets, you rest. What would it look like to kind of get out of this resistance, kind of overly kind of go tension energy? How can I lift and stay relaxed? How can I run if I'm running? I'm training for something right now. How can I run and stay relaxed? How can I do this and that? And it puts us in that perspective of yes and instead of life having to be an either or all the time. If I'm running, if I'm healthy, I can't eat that. If I'm this, I can't that. And it's constantly putting us in that choice of it's got to be extreme one or the other. Instead of saying, okay, what if I can do this and that, be relaxed and be getting fit, and again, and this goes back to the conversation of kind of the umbrella of health that I was mentioning before with health and wellness. There's nothing wrong with training for something. There's nothing wrong with exercising. There's nothing wrong with eating. There's nothing wrong inherently, bad or good, about any of these things. It's the way of being, who I'm being, who is the person that's doing the thing. What way of being do I have? Am I being obsessive and restrictive, or am I being relaxed and open and accepting and loving of myself while I go to the gym, while I make myself a plate of food? And when I'm coming from that place of acceptance and love and loving all the different parts of myself, I might have a little obsessive part over here, and she might show up and be like, "Rah," and it's like, oh, look, oh, you're here. Okay, just come over and sit down because I'm making lunch. and, and it's going to be fulfilling to me. You get to be here and you get to have your say, and it's all welcome. We're not shaming, blaming, judging anything that shows up. It's that full acceptance of who I am. And I get to keep all of my parts with me. And we get to go work out and not obsess about it and be healthy and not to take it to an extreme, and just have a bit more relaxation and peace throughout the whole environment and the whole process. And, kind of come from that place. That's how I'm hearing. That's
Yeah.
how it lands for me, like everything
No,
that you've been
yeah.
saying.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like, what energy are you bringing to it? Like, I told my therapist last spring when I had like signed up for this aqua bike thing that I mentioned, I was like, I'm just like a little bit nervous that I'm going to get like obsessive about it. Like, what? And she said, well, step back and just ask yourself, what's behind this? Are you doing it because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't? Or like a pulling, or I can't remember if that's pulling or pushing, but, like, or is it that you're drawn to it because it sounds fun? Which is it? If it's that obsessive one, check yourself. I'm like, yeah, and it's also like, what meaning do you make out of what you're doing? Like the race that I did actually was on paper, you would think it was terrible. I didn't do quote unquote well. Like I felt like as an athlete, I'm capable of like a lot more. However, the weather was terrible. It was like raining, it was freezing. I literally couldn't see in the water because my goggles had fogged up and they had rearranged the course because it was so foggy. But I actually could not see the buoys. I was just like taking my goggles off and just trying to like look for wherever the kayaks were every like 50 yards. It was crappy. And my hands were numb on the bike, so I couldn't really like manipulate my gels to open them. It was just everything that could go wrong felt like it went wrong. And I had a blast. Because I'm like, I am not attaching the meaning to this of like, if I don't finish in whatever place or whatever time, then it's going to have been a terrible day. I just like reframed the whole thing. I was like, I am out here because knowing that I had this on the calendar meant that I got to enjoy so many fun rides with friends, so many beautiful days, so many places, so many times I got up early when I normally wouldn't have and like watched the sunrise over the reservoir and swam outside. All of that was part of it. And then being there, I was like, I guess I could quit. This is really not fun in the like traditional sense of the word fun. But also I'm like, what am I showing my kids if I quit? Like my whole family got up early to like hold up signs and like support me and give me a high five and everything. I'm like, I'm just going to make the best of it. And it was just like I felt really good about the fact that that was the energy that I could bring to that day instead of, I did not spend any time beating myself up about it or going, like, I feel like, 15 years ago, I would have been like, all right, I'm pretty fit. I'm going to recover from this. And 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, I'm going to do something else to prove that all the fitness that I had wasn't for nothing. But I'm like, whatever. I know I was in good shape. I don't have to prove anything.
Exactly. And well, two things there. One, the proving, like always asking if there is some tension or that push feeling, like you're being pushed to do something, pushing yourself instead of a true calling to something. Like that's how I hear that distinction. It's like, what am I trying to prove? And who am I trying to prove it to? Whose voice is in my head, actually? Is it mine or is it coming from somewhere else? Is it programming from somewhere that I never accepted? Like, I didn't put that there. So it's not mine. Like, wait a minute. And that,
Yeah, it's
again,
taking
like this
ownership
goes for
of
a
your
lot of, yeah, it's taking ownership. Like, wait a minute. I don't give a shit what anyone thinks. Like, I'm going to go out, I'm going to do this thing because it's fun. And this was the second point. So the first one was proving. The second one is fun. Oh my God, lighten up. Right? Like we get so heavy and serious about so many things. It's like just lighten yourself. Give yourself some grace and be able to be light and just do something because it's fun. And that's it. Right? Like I trained and ran the New York City Marathon in 2019. I loved every single solitary training run because it was so fun. It's the framing of the whole thing. How are we framing the thing that we're doing? How do we frame lifting weights? How do we frame eating? How do we frame all these things? Pleasure, enjoyment, fun, all these things matter. It's not frivolous. You can still be a serious person and a sincere person and have pleasure and have fun and play. Again, it's not an either or. I don't have to like be serious and like I'm a serious athlete or whatever and not still have pleasure in the things that I'm doing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And like, in my podcast where I interview athletes, when you talk about success and what makes you strong and fast, almost all of them will say, when I'm having the most fun is when I'm doing the best. So like it's not
Totally.
either or. It can't be. It has to be.
Exactly. I mean, and this even points to, we'll wrap up here in a minute, but this even points to flow state, right? Flow state of, that you lose time, and you hear about athletes a lot saying, like, I think I was hearing about this in a golfer or something recently, like, or, you know, an athlete is doing their course or whatever. And then all of a sudden something clicks and they just, whoo, and they go into that flow state and all of a sudden they win because they stopped trying, they stopped gripping, they relaxed and let the thing move through them instead of them having to be in such tight control. And
Yes.
yeah, I mean, that's exactly to me like what all of this is what pointing to eventually.
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Mm. So what do you have going on right now? What's up for you in your career and professional life? What do you have offerings?
Well, thanks for asking. So, like I mentioned before, I do one on one intuitive eating coaching for people that want to heal their relationship with food in their body and experience food freedom, let go of all the mental baggage or at least some of it, maybe not all of it. Let's be realistic, but really live a life that's aligned with your values and your desires instead of the shoulds and all the, about the food and the body and all of that. And for any listeners who are on the Front Range or going to be in or around Boulder on May 6th, I'm having a 1-day retreat for women who want to make peace with food. And we're going to come together in community. We're going to have some fun. There's going to be some art. There's going to be sharing, a little journaling. And the goal is to start to unpack, like you were talking about, what is mine and what is not mine. Because I do not think you can do the work around changing your relationship with food without first recognizing what are the thoughts and beliefs about food and bodies and exercise that aren't serving me? Where do they come from? Can I let them go? What can come in their place? I think that's a great starting point. And I just think there's so much to be gained, as I know from coming together as women in community. It's like there's some kind of magic. Speaking of midlife and mayhem and magic, there's a magic of women coming together. That's why I love doing this with you. And that's why I have a podcast. Like interviewing women, just being together energizes me. And I know that it will energize the group. So we're going to come together for a 1-day retreat. And you can find out more about that on my website. Go to pam-moore.com. And that's May 6th. And I would love to see any of your listeners there. And of course, you can email me. All my contact info is on the website if you have any questions.
Absolutely. And I'll link all that in the show notes so people will be able to find you quickly and easily. Thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you,
It's
Angie. This has been
so
so lovely.
important. It is really, really important work. And I'm just grateful that you're out there doing what you do and serving women in the way that you do. And I agree, you get women in groups, something magical really does happen. And we learn from each other and we co-regulate each other's nervous systems. I mean, there's a lot that happens. And so, yeah, I highly recommend doing the work that you're doing in groups as well. So I'm glad
Thank
that
you. You know, my
glad that
next
you have that
pivot is
offering.
going to be bottling that, whatever that is, when women come together.
Girl, I'm with you. Like, you can make $1
All
trillion.
right, let's do it. Let's do it.
I love it. Well, Pam, thank you so much again. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much.
Intuitive eating is a really fascinating topic, and I'm grateful to have learned more through this conversation with Pam. And I love hearing stories from other women. It's how we learn best. So, and if you will, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your shows. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you also want to see these conversations. And please share the podcast with your friends. And you can also follow me, Angie.bird, on Instagram. All of this will help the show gain momentum and help other women out there who are looking to create some magic and mayhem in their lives as well.